Hi everyone! I'm gonna try and show you guys how I make my ceramic painter cups on my wheel. Um, so the finished product, may have gotten it dirty with some of the clay, but is this basically. So it's a cup that's made of ceramic with glaze that if you're a painter or an artist or anything like that, you can take your paintbrushes, wet them, and then set them down so that you don't have to set them down like on the table or on a piece of paper or anything like that. And yeah, so I have a bat system where this is my bat, and then it has inserts that I can take in and out that I really like. It's made it a lot easier for me. So first what I'm going to do is, this is a new insert that I put on there. I haven't used it in a couple of weeks. So I'm just going to start the spinning, and with a wet sponge I'm just going to clean it down, get rid of all that old clay that I have there. It's really dried on there, so there we go. Get it all off. And then I want it kind of damp because now I'm going to take a ball of clay that I've rolled up, so just a regular ball of clay, and I'm going to try and toss it as close to the center as I can, and since it's wet it's going to stick very nicely. And that was a terrible throw, and so I just moved it over a little bit, pat it down, that's as close as I can see it, towards the middle, and then I'm going to create a seal with my finger, just so that when I am centering it at the very beginning it doesn't like move around on me. Then I have to get my hands really, really wet. So I have a bucket of water here in front of my wheel, and I'm going to make my clay also really wet. I like to go for like a fast speed for this portion of it, because now what I'm going to do is try and even out all the edges and make my ball of clay as close to the center as possible. So I'm going to center it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my left hand, put it like at, I guess, like 7 o'clock, and then my right hand's going to go right on top, and I'm going to apply a lot of pressure and be as still as possible. So hold my hands in that position as still as possible. What I kind of do is I take my elbows and I push them up against my body. I know you can't really see this, but I push them up against my body as much as possible and hold it really, really tight. So clench everything so that my hand stays still, because the wheel is going to automatically want to shift my hand around. So as I was talking, things got a little dry, so I'm going to re-wet my hands, wet my clay, and go for it. So just going to hold my hands down, and as I'm doing this, I'll let up for a second. The grooves that were on the ball of clay are now smoothing out a little. It's still not very centered, so I'll fix that in a second. So I'll just keep pushing up against it. I'm pushing with my left hand and pushing in with my left hand and pushing down with my right hand. Okay, so pretty good. Still not centered, but we'll fix that in a sec. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-wet my hands, re-wet the clay, and again I'll put my elbows and my arms up against my legs, hold them as tightly as possible, and now I'm going to put my hands like this and push on the left and the right hand side of my clay to try and cone it up. So it's better if I show you. So I'm just applying pressure, my hands have to stay nice and still, and as I apply pressure inward, I'm pushing in that clay, and it's trying to go up where the area of least resistance is, which is up, because down would be towards the wheel and it can't go there. So it's going up, and I'll do that again so I can make it a little taller. So now I've coned my clay. I like to also kind of like smooth out this top part a little bit, so it's kind of smooth. And then I re-wet it, And then I make sure that I have my hand. So I'm going to use this portion of my palm, my right palm, and I'm going to karate chop down onto the top of my clay. While this hand is going to be holding towards the side so that I can form a ball again. So pushing in and pushing down. So this is halfway, what that would look like. I need to push in more because as you can see it's kind of off center. Keep pushing in. And now this is like the tuna can part of it. So it looks like a little can of tuna. So I'm going to wet it up and I'm going to keep applying pressure with my left hand and on my right hand on top to try and form a ball. Like my ball of clay again, or like a little mountain. I need to make sure my hands are nice and still, which they are. I need to push down a little bit more so that there's no hole in the middle. I don't know how that happened. It doesn't usually happen. And still not 100% centered. It usually takes me like 1 or 2 tries. So I'm going to repeat the process of coning. Cone up my clay. Once more. There we go. I'm going to take all this excess, and I have a little bucket right in front of my wheel that you can't see, and I'm going to use that later to reclaim it. And now I'm going to do the karate chop again to make my tuna can. Tuna can, wet it, and then apply pressure with my left hand inwards and my right hand downwards. My hand should always feel, or gradually feel like they're not moving anymore. Because at first, this wasn't perfectly in the center, so they were kind of like moving around as my, as the clay was spinning. But now, they should just like, as I'm applying pressure, lie very, very, very still on top of the clay. And that's how I know I'm perfectly centered. No movement, so that's perfect. This little bit that I'm going to do here, I don't know why I do it, I just usually do it. I guess it's just to feel no bumps or grooves or anything like that, so I just take my finger and I kind of go from the bottom and work my way up on the clay to see if I'm centered, which it feels pretty good. Alright. So next, I'm going to just make a little indentation on the bottom here, just so it's easier for me to pull it up on one of the next steps. You'll see what I mean in a second. Now that I've done that, wet my clay again, and I'm going to take my index finger and make a hole, so push down towards the center of the clay, and I leave like, I guess, I don't know, like ½ an inch on the bottom. So I stop when I've reached like ½ an inch towards the wheel. I'll show you what I mean in a second. And this really just took a lot of practice. I've done this to where I push too far down and then I make the bottom of my cup or whatever I'm making way too thin, or I've made it way too thick and then I have to trim it a lot. It's just taken practice. I still mess up sometimes. So anyways, take my index finger, push down, and then kind of come back up and round it all out. Then I apply a little bit of water in there. And my next step is I'm going to cup around the clay, and with my index finger again, I'm going to open up that ball of clay, because this is how we're going to be able to pull it up and actually make whatever we're making, in this case a painter's cup. So pull it open. I'm just going to keep my index finger as straight as possible, trying to not let up any pressure on any portion of my index finger so that the bottom can also be as flat as possible and the sides that I have opened up be as straight as possible. So then My next step is I'm going to apply pressure to the bottom of this painter's cup, which is not there yet, but it's getting there. So I apply a lot of pressure by going from the center out a couple of times, and this helps avoid like pressure cracks in the future. What else? That's pretty much what I know about that. So I just go from the middle out a few times, always pushing down, applying pressure, making it as smooth as possible. I like to use this tool too. This guy, I'll take him, I'll wet the bottom a little, and I'll kind of just press him down towards the middle of my clay and smooth out all the grooves that I've made and apply even pressure throughout the bottom of my painter's cup. So I've done that. I'll slowly pull them up the wall to make sure the side of my wall is nice and smooth too, which it is. It's great. Take my excess clay on here, put it in my little bucket for later. I'm just going to do one last feel with my fingers, see where I'm at. And that feels great. Cool. Okay, so next step I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the sides of my clay. Make sure my hands are all wet as well, and I'm going to collar up. So what that is I take this portion of my palms, the bottom portions, and I apply pressure starting from the very bottom all the way to the top. So I'm making basically like the walls of my clay nice and centered as well, and making them a little taller, so making it more of the shape that I want it. This isn't the same thing as pulling. This is just getting it nice and rounded to where I want it so then I can start the pulling process. So put my hands around it and then push in and then pull them up slowly. So you can see it's kind of a little taller, it looks a little smoother now. I'll wet my hands again because they get really dry doing this part. And collar again, so pushing in on all sides and pulling up. So my hand kind of like, you can see here I've got clay all over here. That's where I'm applying pressure on my clay. And that's collared enough for me. So next, what I'm gonna do is take my sponge. I just use these round sponges. You can get them at any pottery store. And I wet the inside wall of my clay, because that's where I'm gonna put my finger when I'm pulling up the clay. So my left hand is going to be kind of like at 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, so like 5 o'clock, in between 4 and 5 o'clock. And I'm going to use my sponge on the outside, like this portion of my sponge, to apply pressure on both sides of the wall. It's very important to be on this side because this is the area of least resistance when you're pulling. So you'll get a better outcome when pulling up your clay. So again, left hand, and I use just like my fingers, like the tip of my middle finger or my index finger, and then the other side will be my sponge. Again, middle finger or index finger on the other side of my sponge, and I pull up. My sponge is very wet. Doesn't look like it right now, but it is. And then I go. So applying pressure. I make sure as I apply pressure, my hands are very still, and the pressure is even as I pull my fingers up. So usually what I do is when I place them where they need to go, I take my thumb and I place it on top of my other thumb, like that, and I pull up. Yeah, so let's do that again. I do it a couple of times to get what I want. So thumb on thumb, left hand on my right thumb, and then my index and middle fingers going to be on each side of the wall. I don't know if I wet it, I probably did. And then when I apply pressure with my sponge, I push in, and it forms like a little bevel. With my left hand, I'll pull that bevel up. and until I get to the very top. If I am applying a lot of pressure with my left hand, the cup is going to splay out. If I'm applying a lot of pressure with my right hand, it's going to splay in, so it's going to make it more concave. So anyways, okay, here goes. I'll stop talking. So now I'm just pulling up. And lots of times I'll also, I'll use this portion of my finger, this portion of my finger instead of the tips of my fingers to pull up. I'll use the side of my finger. I find that that's really easy too, especially in the beginning. That helped me a lot because my fingers weren't steady. I didn't know what I was doing. I find that I do different methods for different pieces. It just the way I feel, I guess, in that moment. So now that I've pulled up a couple of times, I'm gonna feel the sides, make sure they feel even. And they really do. They feel good. And on that last pull, I applied a little more pressure inside, so it kind of splayed out a little bit. I don't know if you can see it very well. Actually, it looks pretty even on the video that I'm seeing. But what I'm going to do is, I can see it here, and it looks a little wider on the rim on top than on the bottom. So I wet the outside, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put my hands on each side and pull up so that I even it out. That's pretty even. Cool. I'm just going to do one more feel. Make sure everything feels good and even. Make sure I don't feel any air bubbles, which those for a while there were the bane of my existence. I got a bad batch of clay and every single piece that I threw had an air bubble. So I didn't feel anything, which is great. My next step is, where are you? I use this guy who's filthy right now to get rid of some of that excess on the bottom. So I'm going to slow my wheel as slow as it'll go. There we go. And then I just kind of so I'm going to do this here so you can see it, but I usually do it more closer to 4 o'clock. So I just put his tip down, hold it very straight up against my cup, and try and just get it even. And then I pull it down and I get all that excess out of the way. Okay, once I've done that, again I'm gonna wet, oh my goodness, that wasn't supposed to come with that. That's for another step, I'll show you in a second. So I wet the sides again, make sure my piece, this piece is nice and clean on the sides here. And then I'm going to place him, again on 4 or 5 o'clock, as straight as possible. And I'm going to take my index finger on my left hand, and I'm going to push up against him. And the purpose of this is so that my cup is as straight as this edge of this triangle. So 4 o'clock, push him up against my cup. Make sure he's nice and straight. And then on the inside, push up against my wall. I'm going all the way up. I'll do this a couple of times until I'm happy. And I am happy. And then my next step is, I have a lot of water in there inside my cup. I need to get rid of all that because this guy's got to dry. So this is just, I guess, a bottle cleaner sponge. It has a top piece as well. I got it at Target or something, or I think it was Marshall's. Some people take their little sponges and they put them on the end of a stick. I like this. So I'll just put them in here and grab up all of that water. A couple of times till we are dry. Used a lot of water on this one. Okay, and then last, actually, we're not near the last piece yet, but I have this little piece of, man, I don't know what this is called. I'll put it in the comments or on the description of the video. It's a piece of, oh, the word has left my mind. It's a piece of cloth, but special type of cloth that you can use to smooth out the rim of your piece, whatever you're making, cup, mug, whatever, and just make it nice and smooth and even. So I just apply the tiniest bit of pressure. So I take it and like I kind of like bend it like this, and then this portion on the inside will basically form the shape of my mug, the rim of my mug. And getting rid of a little bit more excess here that I just accidentally put in there. Okay, perfect. Cleaning up a little bit down here. I'm gonna trim this, of course, but I just like it to be nice and clean and easier for me. And then I'm done for the most part. Now for the spout portion of it, I can do this two ways. I can either wait till this dries a little bit more and then carve out a semicircle opening so that my brush can lay there on each side, or I can make like a spout. How I make a spout, which what's been my favorite lately, is I wet my fingers, so make them all nice and wet, and then I take my fingers and make this shape on my left hand, hold it up against my rim, and then I take my right finger and I just kind of pull it down till I get the shape that I want. So just like that. Let me see if I can do it so that you can see it in the video. So right here is kind of like where I want to go. Oh my gosh, it's going to be really hard. Hold on. Okay, now I'm at the right angle. So I'll apply my fingers here. And pull it down. So I have basically the shape that'll be able to hold the paintbrush where it's supposed to go. And right now I'm done. Now it's the job of the clay to dry, and then I can trim the bottom up, carve it, put any design I may want to put on there. So I'll just take this piece here, show you what a final product for now looks like. There's the cup, and that's it. Bye bye.